Mr. President, I also want to speak about a topic I spoke about last week, and that's another of my amendments, Amendment 2269, that improves upon the Army's force structure stationing process and is sponsored by Senators Roberts, as well as Senator Gillibrand and the minority leader, the Democrat leader, Senator Schumer of New York. I again want to express my appreciation to the Senate Armed Services Committee for their diligence in authorizing appropriations for our armed forces in a thoughtful and deliberative manner. This amendment attempts to take the same approach, that approach the committee is taking, deliberate, as the Armed Services Committee is doing today. We want the Army to perform that in a diligent way, their internal process on force structure, to thoughtfully deliberate how and where they make smart investments, which includes stationing decisions of soldiers and families that have an impact on costs for decades to come. Simply put, the intent of Amendment 2269 is to increase the rigor, transparency, and congressional oversight of the Army's stationing process regarding changes or growth in force structure. Both the Department of Defense and the Army are experiencing a much-needed period of growth. Our armed forces are modernizing and increasing their readiness to be in a position to deter, confront, and defeat potential adversaries in an environment more complex and more volatile than we have experienced in recent history. After months of speaking to Army leaders such as Secretary Esper, General Milley, General Abrams on this topic, I'm convinced that the Army's most senior leaders agree that their current process needs improvement to become more accurate and comprehensive. As the Army grows and modernizes, more stationing decisions will be made in the future, and the Army ought not miss the opportunity to conduct the due diligence in all of their decisions and invest wisely to pay down the costs in the future. With the Army's focus on reform, transparency, and using every dollar wisely, and I believe this Amendment 2269 helps the Army maximize the value of every dollar, operate transparently with Congress, and wisely use resources entrusted to them by the American taxpayer. Once again, my amendment seeks to codify the transparency they are seeking and update the Army's stationing process that will ensure the Army is making better, more cost-effective, long-term decisions. The instructions to the Army in this amendment have either already been prescribed by the GAO and the Army's own regulations, or are based on Army testimony and correspondence where it has been made clear that the Army wants to improve their process. For example, with regard to how contiguous and non-contiguous training areas are measured, General Milley testified before the Senate Appropriations Defense Subcommittee, of which I'm a member, and said, quote, "It is my belief that they are rated differently because it seems to pass a common sense test," unquote, given the geography, distance, nature of the training area off post. The fact that the Army's analysis currently considers these training areas as one and the same eluded many of the Army's senior leaders when we first began this process. In addition, this amendment codifies Secretary Esper's February 23, 2018 commitment to improving the quality of life for soldiers and their families by considering, quote, community schools around the installations and the professional licensure reciprocity, unquote, in future stationing decisions. The Army has not incorporated information regarding tax credits, license reciprocity, education, and employment in their basing, so this amendment follows through on the Secretary's intent and guidance to address these factors that are critically important to soldiers and their families. It also encourages, this amendment, its presence in the criteria would encourage states to further support military men, women, and their families. It is a recruitment and retention factor. We say that the Army recruits individuals but retains families, and the quality of life those families experience when they move from installation to installation is paramount to each soldier's personal decision to continue serving. Our intent with this amendment is to support the Army in making decisions based upon fair, open, and comprehensive data, particularly long-term cost factors that will help the Army save in the future years. Those savings can be put toward training, supporting soldiers and their families, sustaining our weapons, and increasing the Army's readiness and lethality. I ask for support on Amendment 2269. I'm convinced these changes will make certain the Army's stationing process is transparent and help the Army maximize the value of every dollar and operate with communications with Congress and wisely use resources entrusted by the American taxpayer. This will pay off in the long term for the Army, for Army families, and for the taxpayers. Mr. President, I yield the floor.